Tribe of Names, Simon here, and welcome to a very windy day here on the Forbidden Drive in the depths of the Wissahickon Park. It's my first walk without Dora, my dog, who sadly died last week. It's a very weird feeling being out here all on my own, but I like getting out in the park anyway. But more to the point, let's talk about today's Monday Muse question, which is music criticism. How do you survive it? Well, let's investigate, shall we? Well, that was both cold and a bit weird walking without Dora, but never mind. Anyway, welcome back to the channel. My name is Simon and I'm a professional musician who has spent the past 30 to 35 years working in and sometimes around the recording music industry. On this channel we provide tips, gear reviews and tips on how to survive making music in the modern day. So one of the many things that I've learned working in and around the music industry is that there are plenty of teachers and courses out there to help get the music inside of you out into the real world. But not a huge amount of help is available to you for dealing with the criticism and the reactions that you get once your music is out there. So today's episode is basically a 101 on surviving music criticism based upon my experiences that I've had over the years. Music criticism today is a very different beast to the one that found its feet back in the 60s and the 70s, which during that era gave rise to the rock star or megastar music critic, people like Lester Bangs and Richard Meltzer and Ellen Willis is another one. And basically I think their music criticism back in the day was much more aligned and similar to literary criticism, which is a much more involved and deeper understanding of criticism and how it relates to the arts. Today there are still some excellent contemporary music critics, people like Jerry Ewing and Anthony Fantano and Ann Powers, are all out there producing what I consider to be very articulate and considered music criticism. But if I'm being honest with you, the vast majority of music criticism that the average musician receives these days come from the internet. You can usually split the internet into two distinctive parts when it comes to criticism. The first being music fans and amateur journalists who wanting to get involved in the music scene and give their opinion on the music that they know and love. And the second one is internet trolls. Now when it comes to good music criticism, it's usually designed to be both insightful and entertaining to read. I know certainly from my experience that all of the best album reviews and music criticisms of bands' discographies or their careers have been both of those things, very insightful and incredibly entertaining to read. Bad music criticism tends to want to empower the critic and diminish the subject of their ire. And I think we've all seen the internet trolls out there, try to demolish people, especially when they're just starting out. And those really are the most problematic people out there, because they hide behind that cloak of anonymity, and so there's never any kind of face-to-face discourse, which means all of the emotional safeties are off when you receive that kind of criticism. Now one of the other interesting things is the abstract nature of music criticism. I remember I think it's attributed to Frank Zappa, but other people have said that it lies elsewhere, but I heard it from Zappa first, and it was that he said writing about music was akin to dancing about architecture. And that's one of the really interesting and challenging things to be a critic when it comes to music criticism. And that's because two people can have very different reactions to one piece of music. The great skill and talent of excellent music criticism is that it serves as a bridge between the objective viewpoint of the person experiencing the art and the subjective viewpoint of the artist who's making it. It's not an easy task to do, but when it's done right, it's an absolute joy to read. So with all that being said, here are 5 tips and tricks for surviving music criticism. The first one is, don't be immediately defensive when you receive some music criticism. And there's a good reason for this. You've got to recognise that not everything that you write is going to be brilliant or even understood. It's a very personal thing, making music, and certainly making any kind of art. And one of the things you have to take into account when you set it out there into the wilderness is not everybody's going to get what you do. And sometimes they'll react negatively towards it. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, in the fact that no two people will react to the same art in quite the same way. If someone out there points out what you know to be a weakness in your writing or your creative process, accept it. It's not a thing to be worried about. You have to be fully open and in touch with what makes you creative and some of the blind spots that you might have developed along the way. And if people out there do indeed miss the point of what you're doing, it might not necessarily be their fault. It could be something which, and I've done it myself in the past. When looking at some of the stuff that I've released, I might not have actually put it out there in a way that people can understand it. And so I try and work harder to try and bridge that gap. It's important, because as artists, we're not infallible. Secondly, if you see negative or hurtful comments about your music, that actually could, and this might sound a bit counterintuitive, but it actually could be a good sign. And the reason why I make mention of that is because in the past I've noticed that when my music has reached beyond my bubble of immediate influence, my friends and fans, it sometimes encounters people who are not emotionally invested in me as an artist. They're not fans of me, and so therefore they're giving me their blunt impressions because they have no emotional investment in who I am as an artist and what I create. When I see people reacting negatively who I don't know or have not seen before reacting to any of my previous material, I personally take it as a sign that I'm reaching beyond my bubble. And that's a good thing. It means that I'm growing. And for every single person who might necessarily react negatively, you might actually find you've gained some fans as well. They just haven't said so. It's important to remember that. Thirdly, and this is perhaps one of the most important things which I've got to say here, which is internet trolls are not to be reasoned with. There's a famous saying that says, never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty and the pig likes it. Everybody knows a troll when they see it, and the trick here, and it's a discipline as well, is not to respond to it. Because usually they're only responding once and they move on and they never even think about you again. It just goes to show, in my opinion, the shallow surface of what an internet troll is about. They're just about delivering one thing, which is hurt. And if you recognise this, you can brush it off, or at least you can use your experience and your knowledge of this to brush it off a little easier. Fourthly, you've got to remember that you're writing music not with the expressed desire to be liked. You're writing it because you need to express something inside of you and get it out and hopefully communicate it in a positive way with other people. Don't feel bad if people react negatively. There is always going to be negative reactions. You have to focus in on the fact that you are expressing yourself in a way that you think is valid. And finally, I'll leave you with another quote from Frank Zappa, and this one I think is always the one which I come back to if I'm feeling particularly hurt by a comment or some kind of article that's writing negatively about my music, and that's this: it's better to have something to remember than anything to regret. I'm an artist, and if you're watching this, there's a chance that you're probably an artist as well, and you have to recognise that criticism comes with the territory. You have to learn to expect and indeed own it at times. So that's all we have time for on this week's Monday Muse. Thank you very much for sticking around to the end. And again, if you like what you saw, please think of subscribing. It really does help the channel if we get more subscribers. And we will see you around next week. So until then, Tribe of Names, this is Simon saying have a good week. Goodbye. Hello, Dora.